going to be talking about three things today. And what I want to be able to do today for you is cover some things that have happened recently, reference Antifa and the DC protests that happened on January 6th with the MAGA protests. And I also want to talk about something that happened. It was a press conference today out of Tampa, Florida. The other thing is, let's see, I want to take a quick look at my notes so I don't forget anything. So Tampa, Florida was Hillsborough County Sheriff's Department and Human Trafficking. I want to talk about that a little bit. And then the third thing is political correctness. How we communicate with each other is a foundational element of de-escalation training and what we do here at Tomorrow's Police Officer and through IDEA, the International De-Escalation Association. So with all that in mind, I want to talk about political correctness, and I'm going to specifically talk about the R word and something that has popped up recently regarding a new celebrity on the block and her use of the R word. So those three things are what we're going to be talking about at 10 at 10. If this is your first time tuning in, or if you haven't tuned in a while, there's been a slight change to the format 10 at 10. So what I do is this. For the first 10 minutes of this broadcast, I'll be talking about those three subjects. I'm going to give you the bullet points, the summaries. And then I'm going to let you know when that 10 minutes is up. I'm then going to dive into each of those three topics more in depth. So the first 10 minutes is just the bullet points. When you have time later, come back, grab the rest of the video by all means. And everything that these videos are about revolve around the concepts and the teachings of Tomorrow's Police Officer, which is communication mastery. How do we communicate well, not just at work, not just with the public as law enforcement officers, but how do we communicate with each other at work, with our superiors, with our subordinates, our peers, and most importantly, it is absolutely most important when we get home with our loved ones. How do we communicate with our family? So let's talk about the Antifa issue and the MAGA protests. There are a lot of people who are saying that MAGA didn't initially force entry into the Capitol building, that it was actually Antifa that started it. Now, there's pros and cons to this position. First of all, let's talk about the pros. So when I say the pros, from a MAGA perspective, it's a pro. They're saying that the initial damages and the problems were not created by the MAGA protesters, but in fact by Antifa. And there are videos out there showing MAGA protesters actually stopping people from breaking windows, stopping people from making entry into the Capitol building. There are also other videos where people are talking about how they witnessed people that they, through one means or another, identified people as Antifa, and that they're the ones that were doing these things, and how they took action to stop them, even though those actions might not be caught on video. So that's on the pro side. On the con side of that argument, the things that go against that claim is FBI is saying right now they have no credible evidence that Antifa was involved. They're not saying that Antifa members were not there at the protests. They're saying that they were not involved in the entry into the Capitol building, damages, things like that. They have no credible evidence to show that yet. Now, as an investigator, and this has been the theme the last couple of days as I've talked about these DC protests, as an investigator, it's really important that you take a look at both sides of the argument, both positions. Now, I'm narrowing it down to just having two positions. In reality, there's more than just two positions. So I want to take a quick look here, and I want to make sure that things are displaying properly and see if there's anybody on here that has any comments. Because what I would like you to do is this. I would like you to put in the comment box, what are your thoughts on this issue? I'm interested to find out what you've discovered. So, all right. Want to double check that the audio was working. What have you discovered on this? What is your point of view on it? What's likely to have happened and what's not likely to have happened? The reason I want you to do that is this. I want to see where your mindset is. It doesn't matter what position you take, but what questions are you asking? You know, I ran into this guy who is an amazing guy. His name is Larry Indiviglia. And Larry, forgive me if I murdered your last name. I believe I pronounced that correctly. He's a great guy. He's an author. He has a book. I'm going to put the title of the book in the comments for this post, because if you have a chance to get his book, it's just coming out. The audio is coming out soon, and it's quite frankly, it's a love story, and it's got powerful stuff about living your life to the fullest. So I happened to run into Larry today, and he told me that I had mentioned something in yesterday's video that he hadn't thought about. And that specifically was during the video of the Capitol police officer that went down some stairs, his baton, or a baton, expandable baton, asp type baton, was laying on the ground. He picked it up. He was trying to keep some protesters back. Then he backed up the stairs. The protesters followed him, ultimately going up a couple flights and coming into a big room where other Capitol police officers joined him. And he was calling on the radio during the time. It sounded like he was calling for cover, but you can't hear what he was saying because the crowd noise is so loud. And the question I had raised was, who was it that shot that video? Was it another law enforcement officer? Was it press? Was it a MAGA protester? Clearly, that Capitol police officer did not mind that person being there. And that person moved with the Capitol police officer down the stairs and then back up the stairs. And Larry brought up the point. He says, you know, I never thought about that. I never thought about who is this camera person? And where did they come from? Why didn't they drop their camera? If it was another officer, why did they not drop their camera and help them? Maybe it was a civilian employee of the police department. I don't know. The point being that it's these type of discussions, your input, that helps all of us. So if I had not raised that question, Larry said, hey, it didn't come to my mind. And so it's likely that you're going to raise a question that might not come to my mind. All right, moving along. Sheriff Chad Chronister of the Hillsborough County Sheriff's Department in Tampa, Florida. Now, they're going to have the Super Bowl there in just a matter of a few weeks. And they have been combating human trafficking there. They, over a month-long investigation, they operated what's called a John detail. So a John detail is where you're looking to arrest the customers rather than the prostitutes. So they did a month-long John detail, and it was doing social media posts, internet posts, having phone conversations with potential customers, clients, and having them respond to a location where they thought they were going to meet up with a prostitute and then arresting them. Ultimately, there were 71 people arrested over a month-long investigation, which is quite a few. What was interesting was there was 2 documented sex offenders, and there was the prerequisite teacher, firefighter, and I think there was a doctor involved in it. In other words, it's the full spectrum. One of the points that, and first of all, again, kudos to Sheriff Chronister and his detectives for the work that they did. It's a lot of work to put all of that together. And the reason that they're announcing it is they've got Super Bowl coming up. They know they're going to have a lot of visitors to the town, and they want to try and get ahead of that. And the point that he was making was, look, in this case, and in a lot of cases, they go after the Johns, the customers, because they want to be able to reduce demand. Hopefully, by reducing demand and getting their name out there that they're involved in this type of activity in this area, then the customers will go somewhere else or not be involved in the activity at all because of the potential for arrest. And therefore, the idea is it won't be profitable anymore for the pimps, and they'll turn to another type of business or go somewhere else. But basically, they're going to get out of Tampa. They did a lot of good work. As a vice detective for 3 years, there was a lot of John details, a lot of prostitution enforcement that I was involved in. And I know how much that takes. So you guys are awesome for the work that you did down there. Third thing I want to talk about, and we're coming up on that 10-minute mark, is this. Haley Deegan. She's an up-and-coming NASCAR driver. She was on Twitch. So she's live streaming, playing a video game, and she used the R word. Now, I'm going to show my age here, and I'm going to show a little bit of ignorance. I'm reading the article, and I'm like, R word. I thought it was a joke. I absolutely 100% thought it was a joke, because I'm thinking, wait a second, some word that starts with R is now, you can't say it. You can't print it. You have to call it the R word. That puts it up on the same level as the N word. This is where I have a problem. The N word is universally recognized as a pejorative, as a negative term, a racist term, and people's careers have been ended. Court cases have been completely changed because of the use of the N-word. You know of one, more than likely, depending on your age, O.J. Simpson case. The O.J. Simpson case changed completely when one of the detectives said, no, I haven't used the N-word, and they had recordings of him using it. It completely discredited that detective's work on a double homicide case. Now, what's happened is the R word, in effect, has been raised to the same level as the N word. And what Haley did was she issued a public apology and said, hey, I'm sorry for using it. It was insensitive of me. And what I'm bringing up is this. First of all, NASCAR. NASCAR is not known for its political correctness. I would say one of the most famous NASCAR drivers out there, Dale Earnhardt, was not a politically correct guy. An amazing man with a drive to succeed that, man, I tell you what, he was just amazing. His skills on the track were amazing. And I don't think that he would have been politically correct. That's just not my impression of him. I never met him in person, but I've studied him. I've read a lot. I've watched documentaries about him. I don't think he was a politically correct guy. That's just NASCAR. That is just, I'm not making excuses. What I'm saying is, let's look at the reality. Let's, and when we talk about the cancel culture, we're kind of in that realm. So what I'd like you to do is this. First of all, I haven't told you what the R word is. I'm not going to tell you what the R word is. Well, if you stick around to the end of the video, I will. And that's not a teaser. It's just I'll talk about it when we dive in depth. But for now, for the 10 at 10 part, you'll find it out. But what I want to know is, did you know what the R word was before you either listened to the rest of this video or you looked it up? Because I didn't. And like I say, maybe I'm just living under a rock, or maybe, time of COVID, I'm in the house too much. And then I'd also like to know, what are your thoughts on being politically correct? Last thing I'll say is this, in relation to the R word. I will never say that you should use languaging that is deliberately meant to hurt someone's feelings or to disparage someone or to hold them down in some way. Not saying that. There is a balance, though, on the idea of concept of being politically correct in our speech and reality in life. And somewhere in the middle of that is treating people really well. Because I don't think being politically correct is treating people well. I don't think that being careless in our speech is treating people well. Somewhere in the middle in there is that. And it's not necessarily a teeter-totter. It's not necessarily a zero-sum game. It's things we have to think about. I said yesterday, do you want to be right or you want to get it right? I always want to get it right. I don't need to be right. I'm willing to move my stake in the ground, but I want to get it right. So help me. Let me know what you think. Okay, so now what we're going to do is this. We're going to move into a deeper discussion on each of these topics. Antifa and MAGA. Antifa at the protests. Let's talk about a fact here. By and large, and I'm talking 95 to 99% of the time, throughout all of 2020, whenever there was a protest and people that were wearing MAGA hats, that were conservative, right-leaning, showed up at a protest, there was no looting, no burning, no vandalism. There was none of that. On the other flip side, there was looting and burning. Flip side being the BLM and Antifa, the main protesters. I mean, they had violent protests in Portland and Seattle that were just crazy. And they weren't even where George Floyd died. Now, let's take a step back and think, okay, if that was the norms, what changed on January 6th, where everything went off the rails? I mean, everything went off the rails from a conservative point of view. And the Democrats are pointing fingers at the Republicans going, everything that you did was wrong. And it was more wrong because it was the Capitol building. It wasn't a random shoe store. It wasn't a random Target, Best Buy, Vons, CVS, run-of-the-mill corporate entity. It wasn't a Starbucks store that we vandalized. It was the Capitol building. And there's something to be said for that. There's something to be said, hey, look, this is a seat of our government. There's certain level of respect that should be shown. And I want to make it really clear, my personal opinion is everybody who went into that building and did something illegal, you are 100% wrong. 100% wrong. Now, if you went into the building and looked around, you're wrong because you weren't supposed to be in there. And the police were, generally speaking, by almost all appearances, telling people to leave. So you should have followed law enforcement orders and not gone in. You knew you weren't supposed to go in. I also understand human curiosity. I understand crowd mentality. It doesn't give you, it's not a free pass in that. Now, there are some videos that show law enforcement acting at a bare minimum, acting like they didn't care that people were in there. The one I showed you on the very first night, 3 nights ago, when I showed you that video of the citizen taking a selfie with a DC Capitol police officer. Now, is that officer going to be in trouble? I don't know. Watch that video and think about the questions that are going to be asked during that internal affairs investigation. And it's gone beyond internal affairs. There's every agency that has an acronym to it is involved in the investigation. Here's the thing. If law enforcement officers are not asking the protesters to leave and it's seemingly a friendly environment, there's at least a hint, if not a out and out invitation to hang out and enjoy the party, as it were. So there's things to think about on that angle. Now, did Antifa show up? again, there's some people that are saying absolutely without question they were there. Now, what's interesting, at a bare minimum, whether it was Antifa or anybody else, people came prepared to do things. They didn't start climbing walls, and they didn't start pulling out pipes and things like that to break windows out of nowhere. The last time that I went to a public gathering, I didn't carry a backpack with all these tools in it to scale a wall. So clearly there were some people there who intended to do what they did do, or at least attempt it. And whether they hoped to succeed or they were just going to try and see what happened or what. And I think they were successful beyond their hopes and dreams. So when we look at this, we look at the history of 2020 and how the groups that were protesting, that were conservative, right-leaning, how they acted during, almost all of them during the protest. And I understand, yes, there was a shooting and killing in Kenosha, Washington by the 17-year-old who brought a rifle to the protest. That's an exception though. I'm talking by and large, they were peaceful protests. And if you have another point of view, please do me a favor, throw it in there. I am absolutely open to information. I am not saying that I have every single video and I've reviewed every single incident. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying as a vast majority of the time, this is my understanding of it. So how did that so significantly change? There are some people who are saying, well, it was the words from President Trump when he said, be there, it'll be wild. I don't think, and again, this is Carrie's opinion, I don't think saying it'll be wild equates to let's break into the Capitol building and ransack and damage. I don't think it and steal Nancy Pelosi's lectern. I don't think that those words are connected. Could he have used different languaging? Yeah, I think he could have. And at the same time, there are people who are making a huge leap saying these words incited all of this. So there's, again, a lot of discussion that's going to be coming today. The Democrats are talking about impeachment to make it a historic second impeachment. They're talking about calling on Vice President Pence to invoke the 25th Amendment to have President Trump removed early. It is now the 11th of January, which means we have 9 days until the inauguration. I don't know that there's that much that would change in 9 days. It's possible. You never know. I mean, there's always a few executive orders that could be thrown out in that time frame. He's worked in shorter time frames than that on executive orders. Okay, let's talk about next. I'm going to close down Antifa discussion. Not close it down as far as I want your comments. I want your points of view. I'm interested to hear what you say. What I'm saying is for the purposes of this video. So let's move on to the second topic. Okay, so the second topic is Hillsborough County Sheriff's Department and their months-long human trafficking investigation. So how prostitution detail, a John detail, human trafficking, whatever terminology you want to use, it's a pretty simple process. You form a fake account on whatever platform. It used to be Craigslist was real popular. Then there was Backpage, which has been completely shut down. Craigslist doesn't run any type of adult ads anymore. Well, allegedly they don't. And we'll use Backpage as an example. So any social media channel, any advertising channel where people can go searching for this type of activity. You form an account, you post an ad saying I'm so-and-so, and these are the services I offer, and use whatever code language there is, and you've got a burner phone. The phone call comes in, you answer it, you have whatever discussion over the phone about the deal, and then Magic occurs afterwards. Now, I can't speak for Florida law. I'm not an expert in Florida prostitution law. I can talk about California prostitution law, and most states are pretty similar in this regard. First of all, there's what we would call big B and little b. So 647B of the California Penal Code is prostitution. So big B was where the either the prostitute solicited, in other words, they began the conversation about sex and money, or something that brought you sexual pleasure. It didn't have to be sex. In fact, I remember during different John details that the female undercover officers would sometimes come back to the command post and they would go, "Hey, got a question for you." They would describe some act, having their toes sucked. The guy wants to suck my toes. He's going to pay me $20. Number one, should I charge more? Number two, is that illegal? So if it's a sex act, it's bringing sexual gratification, and there's money involved, there's a solicitation for that. That's one. We refer to that as big B. The little b is where the undercover detective brought up both the money and the sex. And then it was an agreement. So there's a solicitation by the suspect, or there's an agreement by the suspect. Now, the agreement requires a third thing. So there's two things required: sex and money. The third thing is, if it is an agreement, at least in California, there has to be a furtherance to indicate that the person was going to go through the agreement. So typical scenario, a female undercover detective is standing on the street. Guy pulls up in his car. "Hey, baby, I want this." She says, "Okay, I'm not free." Or there's some languaging about money. There's an agreement made, sex, money. And then if the guy just drives away, there's no crime, because there's an agreement. Depending on how that conversation flowed, there might be a crime. There might not be a crime. It might just be an agreement. And if the guy doesn't indicate one way or the other he's going to go through with it, then there is no crime. So one of the things about prostitution cases is, because they're viewed as victimless crimes, they're not because of human trafficking, but because they're viewed as, by and large, as victimless crimes, what ends up happening is you have to have a really strong case. Almost have to have a video or at least an audio recording. In an ideal world, you're going to have that the way there's no question about what was said by who and in any part of that conversation. And today with technology, there's almost no reason other than a technology breakdown, like your recorder malfunctions, battery runs down, SD card gets filled up, electronics break, some reason, a good excuse for not having a recording. In reality, you're probably going to have a recording. Now, with this, there's so much work, so much documentation that goes into every single step of this. The work by the Hillsborough County Sheriff's Department was tremendous. And Sheriff Chad Chronister, absolute kudos to you for allowing your people to go forward with the investigation, for giving them the resources that they needed, and kudos to the detectives that worked this. Look, the reality is, with human trafficking, there are people that are either through drugs or force or manipulation are doing things that they would not want to be doing. And so it's awesome that this push was going on even separate from the Super Bowl. And the fact that they're going to continue this after Super Bowl is admirable. They got a lot of priorities to balance out. Tampa's a big town, Hillsborough's a big county, and they're working hard for that. So kudos to the Hillsborough County Sheriff's Department. Let's talk about the R word and Haley Deegan. So Haley Deegan, up and coming NASCAR driver. She just won a major race at 17 years old. And yes, I'm going to bring age into this, because regardless of how mature she may be, there's something that we expect of a very young person, and there's something that we would expect of somebody who, let's say, a pro football player, who's been through college, who's been in the pros for a while, and then says or does something that that is considered insensitive, versus a young lady who's in a sport now. And what she's doing in this particular case, when this incident happened, she was on Twitch. She was playing a video game, and it was a racing game. And what she said was, "Hey, this is a lot of fun. Hey, who is that? Who is that?" And she used the R word. "Who's that behind me?" So the R word is retard or retarded. So it's the allegation of somebody who's not mentally progressed. And it's considered to be insensitive in the community. And so what she said was, "Hey, who's the retard behind me on my bumper?" And then she kind of laughed, other people laughed, and then that was it. And then somebody complained about it. Now, the question becomes, did she use it in a way that was disparaging? Well, yeah, to the other player that was on her bumper, and it was done in a teasing way. Did she use it to try and keep somebody down? Did she use it to be rude to somebody, to make them feel bad? I don't think that was her intent. And absolutely, without question, I will always look at intent when we look at languaging. Now, here's the teaching point. And honestly, if you're watching this right now, thank you for sticking with me, because this is the gold nugget of this entire video right here. It's not what your intent is. It's what impact you want to have and what impact you are having. It's not about intent. It's about impact. See, here's the thing. I could get in this video, have the best intentions possible of wanting to help people communicate better, to help people have better relationships with the community, with people that they work with the loved ones at home. And that is my intention. Without question, that's my intention. But if I do or say or act in a manner that has a different impact than that, then I'm not getting done what I want to get done. Again, do I want to be right, or do I want to get it right? I want to get it right. So I always try, and yes, I'm using the word always. Remember, I try and stay away from always and never, but I do. Okay, maybe not always, 99.9% of the time, because I'm not perfect. I try to look at the impact I'm having in the questions that I ask, the topics I bring up, the content that I produce for tomorrow's police officer, the teaching that we do, the courses that we develop, the people that we bring into our world to help share this information. I look at the impact on all of that. And the reality is, sometimes we focus only on intent instead of focusing on impact. Now, what was the impact that Haley had? Well, at the moment, I don't think she had a bad impact. Clearly, though, somebody got triggered. Now, why did they get triggered? Did they get triggered? And this is where my investigator brain kicks in, my detective mode turns on. It's like, okay, somebody brought this up. Somebody made it a news story. Why? Why was it so important to talk about what a young lady who happens to be a NASCAR driver, an amazing driver, very talented, said in literally one word out of an entire streaming gaming session on Twitch? Why was it so important to bring that up and make it a news item, to where now it's a headline, where she had to issue a public apology? What's the gain out of that? What's the benefit to that person or people who did that? I personally happen to think it's because they like to be in the news, or they get paid for producing news stories. I really do think that's what it is, because in the big scheme of things, the impact that moment had was limited for several reasons. It was limited not just to whoever was on Twitch, but who happened to watch that video and that second, that half of a second, to say retard. How long does that take? It's not even a second that takes. And here's the point. Out of all of that, that's what they're focusing on. They're not focusing on all the good that she does in the world. They're not focusing on her skills as a driver, how she's inspiring young people, how she's interacting with young people on a gaming session on Twitch, and giving kids the hopes and dreams about a career doing something really cool, being a race car driver. And it takes skills to be able to do that. The news isn't focusing on that. They're focusing on a half second in the use of one word. And here's the other big issue that I have with this whole thing is they have just raised the R word to equal the N word. And I don't agree with that. I don't agree with that at all. The R word does not have the history that the N word does. But because we're going to use it as a letter, and there's not many terms that we use like that. We don't call it the J word. No, it's jackass. In fact, we name a movie Jackass. And I think calling somebody a jackass probably has more impact on them. Maybe not. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe you have a different opinion. Do me a favor. Let me know. Put it down below. Let me know what you think about this. Because political correctness can be used to put people down and to hold people back and to ruin careers for instances where the impact is minimal. I think this is one of those instances. I think, Carrie. So let me know what you think. I'm curious about that. Okay, so I think I'm going to sum this all up, this section, with an R word squared. Really ridiculous. Really ridiculous that was a news story. However, the beauty of it and the gratitude I have for it being a news story is this. We get to talk about how our communication has impact on other people. So please, look not just at the intent that you have. I lived most of my life that way, looking at, well, I didn't intend for that to be the case. I didn't look a lot at the impact I was having on people. So please, learn from my mistakes. Look at the impact that you have on people, not just your intent. That's it for today's 10 at 10. I hope you enjoyed it. Please share this. Hop on YouTube and subscribe to our channel. Click on the little bell so you get a notification when a new video drops. Like us on Facebook, share, and help get the word out about tomorrow's police officer. Thanks for your support. Thanks for your time. I really do appreciate it and value it. Until next time, stay safe.